Welcome to Krassensteins. Today we have a very special guest, the CEO of the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon. So the Babylon Bee promotes themselves as the definitive source of fake news that you can trust. So is this interview fake news?
Some of it might be. You'll have to make that decision.
All right, so unlike other interviews we've done, I really want this one to be more of an open conversation about free speech, also about the state of comedy in today's environment that has this ever-growing amount of cancel culture. I think most of us can agree on that. Also,
Yeah.
the Twitter bans that all three of us have had to face and endure over the last couple of years. Censorship, mostly on social media, and Elon Musk's X, as well as the absurdity that we're seeing satire kind of intertwine with reality and what AI and stuff's going to do to kind of
Yeah.
confuse us in that realm.
Good. That's
So
all. It's all right in my wheelhouse.
yeah, so like how are you doing? I guess the first question is what's new with you and what are you doing? What are you up to?
Oh, are we talking personally or in business? Personally, I slept funny the other night. My neck hurts. I guess that happens more when you're 40 plus. I don't
Your
know.
head's
But I
a
just
little
turned,
crooked. I noticed your head's not
man,
straight. I have
my
the same
neck.
problem though. Like
If
I
I
look
look
at
stiff,
myself.
that's why. I injured myself sleeping. I'm so old.
We're both
Um,
turning 42 tomorrow,
oh,
actually.
are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, happy early birthday.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully you don't hurt yourselves as easily as I do. Um, I mean, we're just happy to be back on a platform where the conversation is happening. It was the biggest upset to our business over the last year and a half, 2 years was the deplatforming from Twitter that happened as a result of a joke we told that we weren't supposed to tell, and the response Twitter had to that. And so, just being back in the conversation, being back on that platform, and and having the ability to make the jokes they don't want you to make and not be concerned about getting deplatformed for it. I mean, we still can get deplatformed in other places. We have a YouTube channel with 1.5 million subscribers. We have, a couple million followers on Facebook, Instagram, the same.
Do you
So
worry though? Do you like have this constant worry in the back of your head that you're going to be deplatformed on like Twitter or Instagram?
not so much on Twitter. Well,
Not Twitter. I'm
X.
sorry,
Yeah.
YouTube or Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some concern there that could happen. Um, but as far as like worry that it's going to put us out of business. I don't really worry about that. And there are ways in which when they try to silence your voice, they actually amplify it. We found that's happened a lot with us and others, the Streisand
Yeah.
effect, as you could call it. So I'm not really super worried about getting kicked off of YouTube or Facebook. If it happens, it happens. I think we'll be able to generate more subscribers as a result of that and get more support directly from our users. And that's when stuff like that happens, that's when we appeal to people and say, look, we don't want to be dependent on big tech. We'd rather have you be supporting us financially than be dependent on these companies for, clicks and traffic and ad revenue that they're sharing with us, the pennies they want to throw our way. So I'm just as happy to be off those platforms as I am to be on them, as long as we can still reach our audience in one way or another. And as long as we have, X or something like it, then so be it.
It's kind of funny because like you said, like the Streisand effect, so many of these people who are banned on platforms, it has the reverse effect. And these people become bigger, they make more money, and they get
Yeah,
a bigger reach. So
right.
like that, like if you're against a person, you shouldn't actually want them to be deplatformed because it's actually gonna amplify them even further, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
there's some people I've only ever heard of because they were canceled. you know, it's like that's
Yeah,
what put them on the
exactly.
map was getting canceled.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it probably happened with us. I mean, I think a lot of people probably never heard of us until we were banned from Twitter back in what year? Oh, 2019.
2019. Yeah, yeah, like
oh
yeah.
wow, a
So
while
so
ago.
so getting to that,
Mm,
2019, we were both banned for allegedly buying our accounts. I don't want to get into all that, but the Babylon Bee was also banned in March of last year
mm.
for jokingly selecting Rachel Levine, who's a prominent transgender government official, as their pick for Man of the Year. Can you elaborate a little bit on the ban, as well as any communications you had with Twitter at the time, like shortly after the ban?
Yeah, so the joke, I mean, the backstory behind this joke was, well, first of all, there was a real headline. USA Today had named Rachel Levine Woman of the Year. They had, I guess there were several women that they had picked, and Rachel Levine, in my view, is not a woman. You know, in my view, Rachel Levine, this is a male person. A man is a male. That's a man. So, you know, we look at it very differently. We're doing all of our humor and comedy from a Christian conservative worldview. And so we disagree with this idea that men can become women. And so we joke about it when people actually take the idea seriously, like USA Today did. USA Today was the target of the joke. You know, the purpose of the joke wasn't to make fun of an individual or put them down or make them feel bad about themselves. The purpose of the joke was to push back on this idea that people can actually change their gender, that it's not attached to their biological sex. And so it seemed to us like parody when USA Today had named a male person Woman of the Year. You know, there's a lot of women who are upset by that. You know, it displaces women. It erases the category of women, or at least broadens the category so much that it becomes almost meaningless. It's like, well, what does it even mean to be a woman? Anyone can
I can
identify
definitely
as a
see
woman.
that argument too. Like for women that are striving to become woman of the year, and then a transgender woman becomes woman of the year.
Exactly. Yeah.
No matter what your take
It's
on,
like, wait a minute. So now males are the best at everything. Men are the best at everything. Can't women have their own categories where they're the best at something?
or even have a
So,
transgender of the year. If that's what you want,
right.
right?
Yeah, that's one option. So we were looking at it and trying to think of how we could, you know, satirize this. And it was difficult to satirize, as many things are today, because, you know, you mentioned at the beginning this kind of how satire and reality are becoming intertwined. There's a lot of insane things that are happening in our culture and society today that are so bizarre and outrageous. People think they're satire or parody, and they're not. They're real headlines. That's why they'll share something and say, oh, this is not The Onion. This is real. Or this is not the Babylon Bee. This is actually real. So there's a lot of that going on. And we were thinking, well, how do we satirize this? And the best we could think of was to just flip it on its head and say that we had picked Rachel Levine as our pick for Man of the Year. And we joked about it internally in our little Slack channels about how we were going to get kicked off Twitter for this because they were going to consider it misgendering. So there was a little bit of joking going on that this was actually going to potentially result in us getting banned. And sure enough, you know, it went a little bit viral. I don't know how many likes it had before it got reported, but Twitter sent us a message saying that it violated the hateful conduct policy and we needed to delete the tweet if we wanted to unlock our account. So they just locked us out. It wasn't like a permanent ban where someone is like suspended and has no access to their account. It was, you can log into your account, but in order to do anything with the account, you have to first delete this tweet. And so over the delete button, it's like you got to check a box saying you agree that you violated the terms, including the hateful conduct. And we're like, we don't agree to that. You know, we don't believe that it's hateful to refer to a male person as being a man. So we can agree to disagree on that. And if you don't like the joke, you can take it down. But we didn't want to censor ourselves. That was really the point that was a sticking point for us, was the principle of, you know, why would we do the tyrant's work for him and censor ourselves? If they want to take it down, they can take it down. So we were kind of at a deadlock with Twitter, and we did appeal it. We submitted an appeal, and it came back very quickly. I think within like 24 hours or so, we got a response saying that they reviewed it. We did violate the terms as written. And so we had to delete the joke if we wanted our account back. And that's when I put out a statement saying we're not doing that.
It's just so unbelievable to me. And we might have different views ourselves on like transgender and all that, various issues, but you're literally a satire website. So
Yeah.
like what you're saying doesn't have to be taken seriously. So the fact that they're actually banning you for a satire post, it just kind of blows my mind.
Well, it's you know, there's a reasoning behind it, and the reasoning is, or so the way that it's described is, you know, jokes like that are considered punching down. They're inappropriate. They are offensive. They are an example of hatred disguised as comedy. So, you know, Facebook had put out a statement back in 2021 about how they were going to crack down on comedy and satire that punches down. And when they use that phrasing, that terminology, what they mean by that is comedy that's written by people who have power and privilege, but is targeted at people who lack power and privilege. So, you know, you're supposed to think of yourself in like this hierarchy where, you know, I'm up here, the people I'm joking about are down here, therefore it's punching down. I shouldn't do that. It's wrong.
Are you allowed to punch up? Is there a rule?
Who do I punch up at? I'm a straight white male Christian. I don't know. I mean,
No,
in
I mean
their
in
view of the
general, like
world, yeah, in their view of the world, I'm at the top of power and privilege. And so who do I joke about? I guess I can only joke about God. I don't know.
Maybe Elon Musk, you can punch Elon Musk up.
Yeah, he's richer
yeah,
than
there
I
you
am. Maybe that's
go.
it. Billionaires, I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's how it works. You get down to how much money's in your bank account.
So then
But yeah,
Elon,
but the concept of punching down is one, that I have my disagreements with, but that's the justification they have for saying, well, yeah, you say it's satire, you say nominally it's satire, it's a joke, but jokes can be harmful, jokes can be hurtful, and all of the criticisms I have of punching down we could get into, but the biggest thing is I don't believe that this is actually about preventing people from being harmed. I think it's a way of exercising control over people's speech and controlling what they can and can't say. There are narratives that they don't want you to poke holes in. And so in order to insulate them from criticism, they disallow jokes about them. I think that's really the problem. But it's also condescending. I mean, imagine if somebody said, you know what, you guys, I don't think anybody should be allowed to make jokes about you. You're so fragile. You're so oppressed. You're so marginalized. If someone told a joke about you, that would be too much for you to handle. I'm going to protect you from that. And I'm going to tell other people they can't joke about you. I mean, how condescending is that? Wouldn't that offend you more than a
yeah,
joke?
no, like Brian and I, we have so many memes of us that are spread around X. Like there's
Right.
one of me
Yeah.
riding on Brian's back. There's like one where we're like have our legs spread against
Can
each
we put
other's
these up on
legs.
the screen? Throw them up.
I
Let's
should,
look
yeah,
at
we
them.
should
Yeah.
do that. But I mean, like to me, it's funny. Like I get a laugh out of them. I like show my wife. I'm like, look at this one, Wit. So it's like
You
to
got to be
me,
able to laugh at yourself and
yeah,
not take things
exactly.
so seriously. Look, there are reasons to make fun of you guys. There's reasons to make fun of me. There's reasons to make fun of the Babylon Bee. There's reasons to make fun of Elon Musk. There's reasons to make fun of Rachel Levine. And so, or USA Today for that matter. So, everybody needs to take themselves a little bit less seriously. And I think that we lose something in our culture when we start restricting comedians and creating all these no-fly zones where even comedians can't go. And we do it under the guise of protecting people and saying this is about protecting people from harm, things that might offend them or harm them. All we're doing is protecting them from healing. Ultimately, it's not protecting them from harm, it's protecting them from the healing that comedy brings. Comedy brings people together. If you go back 20 years or 30 years to what comedians were doing in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, there were very few rules in comedy, and there was a lot of offensive stuff out there. And guess what? Everybody got along better.
And
Yeah,
I think people are okay with being made fun of generally if it's coming from someone that they like, right? But if it's coming from someone they don't know or somebody that has differing views from them, then it's like, oh no, how dare you make fun of me?
but it has the same impact, right? It
Yeah.
shouldn't be that way. Like who cares? Who cares if somebody on the right makes fun of me versus somebody on the left? It's the same words and the same. It should have the same impact.
Yeah, who cares? And this it's a fallacious idea anyway that you have some kind of right to not be offended that trumps everyone else's right to speak freely or make jokes. I mean, it's if you're offended by something and it bothers you that much, first of all, you're going to be a less happy person than someone who can let that go. But secondly, you can just walk out. You can block or mute. You can tune out. You don't have to listen. But you certainly shouldn't have the right to take away the voice of someone who offends you, because a joke that's offensive to you might be really funny to other people. You don't have the right to put an end to that.
Yeah, so let's get back to your suspension or whatever you want to call it from Twitter, now X. So Elon swoops in, kind of unbans you, but he did send you a DM and you posted this on both X and on Instagram. And that DM read, let me find it here. He said, "Do you want the bee restored? There will be no censorship of humor." We don't see what your response to that was. Was there a response? Like how did you respond to Elon when he sent you that message?
Nah, I'm good. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I said yes, obviously. Yes. I was like, I explained that we're not actually banned. We're not permanently suspended. They just want us to delete a tweet. So, and we don't want to delete the tweet. And so it started a whole conversation about, well, why don't you just delete it to restore your account? I'm like, we have our reasons. We don't want to. On principle, I don't think we should have to censor ourselves. And he agreed with us on that and found a way to get us reinstated without deleting the tweet. So, I mean, waking up to that message, I mean, we were locked out in like March of 2022. And then there was that whole roller coaster of him trying to acquire Twitter and then trying to get out of the deal and then them suing him to keep him in the deal. And all that stuff was happening. And we were wondering, like, is Musk actually going to take over? Because if he does, he might actually set us free and let us tweet again. So we were kind of waiting to figure out what was going to go on there. We had a conversation with him when we first got suspended where he had asked us, he was trying to verify whether or not we had been suspended. And we said, yeah, we have, it's real. And he was like, man, I might just have to buy Twitter. And this was right around the time we first got suspended.
So,
of course, we
he
thought he was
bought Twitter
kidding,
just to unsuspend the Babylon Bee. Is that, are you
No,
So
no,
you
no.
lost him like $20 billion. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, we joke that we owe him $44 billion and we
I saw your interview.
we
Yeah.
gave him an IOU for $44 billion, which I didn't sign. So he's not on the hook for that. We joke about that, but it was obviously, and he said this publicly too. It wasn't just about the Babylon Bee. The Babylon Bee was symptomatic of a greater problem. It demonstrated. He was just talking about this on Rogan. An interview with him and Rogan just came out, and he was talking about how, there's a lot of control over what you can say and what you can think, and bad ideas are given free rein to proliferate on these platforms with no one even able to check them or criticize them because the powers that be will silence those voices, and it's imbalanced. And he wanted to restore balance and freedom so that the best ideas can rise to the top. And so he saw tremendous value in preserving comedy and preserving the right of people to disagree with whatever the powers that be are trying to push on everyone. And apparently he saw so much value in that he was willing to spend, $44 billion to take over the platform and make a difference. So it was much bigger than just the Babylon Bee. And we jokingly take credit for him purchasing the thing, but he was genuinely concerned that we had been knocked off and didn't like that comedy was being made illegal. So, and you saw one of his first tweets after he took over was "the bird is freed," and then eventually he said comedy is legal again. And so that was a big thing for him.
Yeah, like I think you guys fit into like the perfect category that appeals to Elon Musk, which is free speech as well as comedy. He loves comedy. So I think the Babylon Bee is important to him. But yeah, so like banning in general, like what's your take on banning on social media? Should it never happen? Should there be a line that if you do cross it, that maybe perhaps a ban is adequate? Like, for instance, Alex Jones.
Mm-hmm. I think bans should be used sparingly, because generally speaking, I think the people who are saying things that are really awful, terrible things that most people wouldn't agree with, everyone has the option. Twitter gives you the tools. For example, we got to say X, we don't want to keep dead naming the platform. X gives you the tools where you can block or mute those people that you don't want to hear from. If they say something you don't like and you never want to hear from them again, you can mute them, you can block them, you can tune them out, which is in a free society, that's much better than taking away their voice and saying they shouldn't be allowed to speak at all. Because if we're going to treat these digital platforms like the public square, which Elon Musk views them that way, he's called them the de facto town square, and I think that's accurate. I think that the public square has gone digital in the modern age. The Supreme Court has acknowledged that, and now it's a matter of figuring out, well, if that's the case, and we want free speech in the modern public square, then we have to make sure that our laws are modified to accommodate that. If right now these are private companies that can basically do whatever they want and just silence whoever they want, that's a problem. If this is where the vast majority of public discourse takes place, it means that the First Amendment, which is supposed to give us freedom of speech, isn't really being protected in the place where it needs to be the most. And so it's really more an argument of not what can private companies do, but how should it be if the private companies are hosting the public square. I don't think banning is really the answer. I think maybe in some cases, sure, it could be appropriate to ban somebody, especially if all they do is making death threats or something like that, or breaking the law. Unlawful speech should not be permitted. But as far as going much further beyond that, I do think platforms should be allowed to engage in moderation. I think that if people are saying really nasty things, or they're posting pornography, or obscene and lewd stuff, that's all stuff that's in view of Section 230 and what these platforms should be allowed to moderate. Content like that is not an opinion. Like it's not a political viewpoint. It's not ideology that's being expressed. And so, I don't see an issue with having moderation around those things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
think you
kind
need
of
to, right?
I was just gonna say I kind of feel like everybody like draws this line somewhere else, and that's why it's such a debated issue. Like some people might say somebody posts a swastika that should be bannable, or at least the post shouldn't exist.
Right.
Somebody else might say if it's illegal. So like it's just so hard to come to an agreement. So I understand why like both sides are always pushing back and forth. It's not an easy concept. If it was easy, I don't think Elon would have had to come and buy X.
Right, so we're back. Seth had some issues with his equipment, so he had to move locations, but don't
I
worry, we're
think
back.
Jack Dorsey might be trying to ban him or maybe censor him.
Sabotage.
I'm being
So
censored.
so let's get back into the changes from Twitter to X that Elon Musk has implemented. Do you agree with what he's done and what the X team has done regarding community notes? I know it was a feature that was on the old Twitter, but it wasn't very utilized. Everyone used
Birdwatch,
it.
right?
Birdwatch, yeah, it was Birdwatch. Now it's community notes. Do you think it's working, and do you think it's a solution to the problem of misinformation being spread?
Um, well, for one thing, I think community notes are extremely entertaining. Watching people get noted is awesome. I've been noted myself, but it's incredibly amazing when you have somebody, especially these politicians that are trying to get away with just like outright lies, and then they get a note that just completely refutes them point by point. I think it's awesome. As a rule, what a lot of people say, especially conservatives who are like free speech champions, they'll say um, the answer to speech you don't like is more speech, and I think that's true. I think well, there's two answers. One answer is to tune out, like I said before, and the other is to respond with an argument of your own. Refute whatever somebody's saying that you don't like instead of taking their voice and their platform away. Show us why they're wrong. Um, and I think community notes is an example of more speech rather than less. Instead of hiding the tweet, or the post, instead of taking it down, instead of um, blocking someone, it's appending context onto it that either refutes it or elaborates on what the claim was that's being made, which is the more speech principle. And so I think that's great, and that's critically important, especially when it comes to things like the medical misinformation problem that we were having on big tech, where these platforms were trying to use CDC guidelines and WHO guidelines and all of these things to say what to put guardrails around what you're allowed to say and not say on these platforms. And it turns out that as we learned more, a lot of the things that people were saying that were considered misinformation turned out to be true. And their defense is to say, well, it was based on what we knew at the time. And that statement right there, that excuse, it was based on what we knew at the time, concedes that knowledge changes over time.
Yeah.
And if knowledge changes over time, then there should never be a time at which Google or YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or whoever think that they know what's true and can be the arbiters of what's true and can tell you that what you said was definitely false. Knowledge may change tomorrow, and whatever they're trying to censor right now turns out to be true. So I think the concession that it was based on what we knew at the time is a concession that knowledge changes over time, which is a knockdown argument against censorship. They shouldn't be censoring. If anything, put a community note on it and say, based on the available knowledge as of today, this is disputed or something like that.
Yeah,
Well,
or put like a actual study, like a placebo-controlled double-blind study up there to show what the medical community has found up to this point, right?
right, without taking it down or
Yeah.
permanently suspending the doctor who, based on their research and experience, says that they think, in their expert opinion, that this is true. We need to have a debate. The best way to get to the truth is through debate, not through censorship. I think censorship guards narratives, not the truth. And as we've seen over and over and over again, in fact, it guards narratives at the expense of the truth. And so censorship is not the answer. Community notes is much better than censorship. I think it'll be annoying to me if a lot of our jokes start getting community
That's what
noted.
I was wondering. Like, have you
Yeah.
had that happen? Like where you get a lot of community notes on jokes?
Not yet. We've been fact checked a bunch of times, but on Twitter or X, I don't think we've really seen many community notes, if any, attached to satire that we've written. It's a matter of time before it happens. I hope it doesn't happen frequently because it kind of ruins the joke when you're explaining the joke.
So the thing is, like, the community notes have to be approved by other community note raters.
Right,
And
right.
if it's satire, it's the obligation of those raters to
Acknowledge
note that it's satire and acknowledge it, and not award that note to that note writer.
Right, right. So there are, yeah, there's safeguards in place against that. But generally speaking, look, I'm happy with the fact that voices that used to be silenced can now be heard. Creators are monetizing now and making a nice living on the platform. So there are positive changes. I do have disagreement with the freedom of speech but not reach principle. I don't think that muting somebody's voice so that it can barely be heard or can't be heard at all is any better than silencing them altogether.
Yeah, like what about just adding variables to the algorithm to maybe push certain things down further than others? Because I guess things are already like that, right? Things are already being amplified or de-amplified based on a whole sort of array of variables. So adding maybe certain signals to those variables, do you think that could actually work as the freedom of reach thing?
What if the
Signals of
algorithm
what
uses
kind? What do you
notes?
mean by signals?
Well, so maybe one signal could be like if certain people, if there's a certain number of blocks or mutes, or if there's a certain
I
number
don't know
of
about that.
reports
I'd
on
say it's
content.
like, what if it's community noted? Like, maybe a community note should be a signal that this could potentially be misinformation, and then it could be deboosted, as in pushed down in the algorithm. You would be against that as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, so here an analogy might help. Like, imagine you're invited to speak in the town square. You know, the mayor of the town is telling you that, you know, come here. This is the town square. This is where you can be heard. Come say what you think. We want to hear your opinion. And then you show up and you start saying things that the people around you don't like. And so they say, oh, wait a minute, you come over here, step inside this soundproof booth and keep speaking inside the soundproof booth so that we can't hear you. Then it's like, well, what's the point? Why am I here at the town square if you're stuffing me inside a soundproof booth? That is freedom of speech, but not reach. You're there, you're talking, words are coming out of your mouth, but nobody can hear you. I mean, what's the point of that? So I think that, again,
I guess my pushback would be, so there's already varying degrees of reach based on so many other variables.
Yeah,
Would
like
it,
likes or comments or
yeah,
retweets
like
or
would it be
retweets.
harmful to add additional variables that might push down hate speech?
yeah, I think so, because the problem there is who is the arbiter of what
Yeah.
constitutes hate speech.
Well,
Our joke about Rachel Levine is hate speech in the opinion of a lot of people. The people that were running Twitter before thought that was hateful conduct. That's the whole reason why we were locked out and why we had to delete the tweet. So I don't, you know, those are subjective judgments. And so,
what if you democratize that judgment, kind of like how community notes is democratized, where you have basically there's different weights based on how much one person agrees or disagrees with those same viewpoints.
that's challenging too, because then a simple majority can control what's acceptable.
Yeah.
And
So the way community notes works, though, is that, so like, if, let's say, you and Brian are community notes raters, and somebody puts a community note on one of my posts, and you two have agreed on a lot of all the previous community notes that you've voted on, you agreed, and you said, yes, these should be there, or these shouldn't be there. But there's another person over here who has always disagreed with Brian, but on this one, he agrees, so it holds more weight. That's how community notes work. So could that be transitioned into maybe a hate speech, notice on an account, or misinformation notice on an account, or whatever you want to say, as far as, having a negative
yeah,
sort of an
I'm
algorithm?
just I'm gonna take a hard line on this, and I'm gonna say no, I don't think so. Especially misinformation is such a slippery thing. Like I said,
It
if
is.
knowledge changes over time, we shouldn't be suppressing things that we consider to be misinformation, because even the community notes people are only have available to them the knowledge of the present day. They don't know
Yeah,
what's
that's
going to
true.
come out tomorrow. And so even them, you still have the same problem of knowledge changing over time. And if you ditch it in the algorithm today based on community notes, maybe you shouldn't have based on what we learn tomorrow. So you shouldn't do that. If anything, more speech, attach a note to it and say, based on what we know today, whatever, you can put a note on it, but I don't think it should be downranked. I don't think it should be hidden. And I don't think it should be hidden if certain people consider it, offensive or awful. This whole like lawful but awful. We should downrank that stuff. No, you give people the tools to block and mute whoever they want. And if it's showing up in your feed and you don't want to see it, you tune them out. Don't take away their voice. Because I think a lot of things that people on the left say are truly awful, but I don't think they should lose their voice for saying them. They think I should lose my voice for saying the things that they think I say that they think are awful. And I know for a fact, I don't say any hate speech. I don't hate anybody, but they'll consider a lot of my viewpoints to be hateful. So it's just, we can't do that. I mean, free speech is free speech. You either honor it or you don't.
It's definitely a tricky situation. Like on one end, you have, posts being boosted because people like them or people are engaging with them. So like to me, a deboost because of a flag in the algorithm wouldn't be as detrimental as I think it would be to you. But I think that's just a disagreement on, what the best way to run a public square would be.
Well, I think the trickiest thing, the toughest thing for Musk, because Musk calls himself a free speech absolutist. I think if he had his way, and it all depends on what he means by that, but if he had his way, I think that there would be more speech than is presently allowed. I think a lot of the reason why he can't just do what he wants with free speech is because he is beholden to the advertisers to a certain extent. You will lose so much revenue if you don't adopt some kind of okay, we're going to limit it if it's awful but lawful, freedom of speech but not of reach. Those are the kinds of things you say if you want to keep the advertisers happy, because then the advertisers are like, okay, well, as long as this platform is limiting all that nasty stuff, my ads aren't going to be showing up next to it as much. And so I'm willing to spend on this platform. So there's a compromise, meet in the middle kind of thing that's happening there. And so, my opinion is if it's the public square, it's the public square. Advertisers have to deal with that. But, there's practical realities that have to be dealt with with finances and all of that.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I think that Musk would definitely open things up even more. But he realizes that he does need to at least make X profitable in order to have a platform that allows for free speech. So it's kind of like touch and go. And I think ultimately they're moving a little bit more away from advertising so that they're not reliant solely on advertising, and they can do more things that are, in Musk's view, beneficial to the community, I think, as a whole.
Yeah, if they're generating more revenue from subscribers, for example, then they're going to be a lot less beholden to the advertisers and having to worry about what they say. But as of right now, I mean, they're just kind of hovering near break even. I think they're just losing a little bit, not quite break even or getting close to it, but they're in a position where they still need ad revenue right now. So it's a tough spot to be in. But finding about at least if you limit some of the things that you're doing to the tweet level or post level versus the account and say, okay, well, this particular post was problematic, and so we're not going to give it as much reach, but we're not going to downgrade the whole account or silence this person's voice altogether because of this post. Those are compromises that I'm not necessarily 100% happy with, but it's better than the old way of doing things, where somebody would say something that was disallowed that turned out to be true later, and they were permanently suspended for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that at least targeting the post rather than the person, like long term, is the better approach. So getting back to comedy, I actually do.
We got so serious there for a little while.
Yeah, I know. I actually do read the Babylon Bee, believe it or not. And although it's clearly right-leaning in my mind, it has that slant. It does. It makes me laugh more times than it doesn't. That's
good. Thank you.
Political correctness ruined comedy today? And is there anything you'd refuse to touch with the Babylon Bee? Like, for instance, would you post a joke article about the Holocaust or Hitler or something like that?
So the first part of the question is about political correctness. Yeah, I do think political correctness has to some extent ruined comedy. And in other ways, it's opened up doors of opportunity, right? I think part of the reason why the Bee is so successful is because we've kind of stepped into this void left behind by comedians who weren't willing to make certain jokes anymore. And you have, Joe Rogan said at one point, woke shit is the funniest shit. And that's why the Babylon Bee is so funny, is because they're willing to go there and make these jokes about things that deserve mockery. He's like, it's deserved. These are mockable ideas, extremely mockable ideas. And comedians are tiptoeing through a minefield, trying not to step on something that might blow up their whole career and get them canceled. And so, Bill Maher, the way he put it was, he's like, doing comedy today is like walking around on a rooftop with a blindfold on. You don't know when you're going to fall off the edge. And it's by design. It's been created that way. There's all this pressure put on people so that they will self-censor, so that they will avoid even making those jokes. And then the narrative that's being promoted is never challenged or criticized. I think mockery is one of the most potent and powerful ways of criticizing ideas that are being pushed on us by the powers that be. And so they realize that, and so they know what levers to pull to try to put pressure on people, and the mob helps reinforce that. That's the whole cancel culture thing. But yes, the political correctness combined with the cancel culture mobs has resulted in comedians not being funny, and oftentimes they are just guardians of the narrative who are up there promoting the narrative. The whole vaccine stuff that the late night comedians were pushing wasn't funny. It was cringe and it was weird. They were just all in with Pfizer, and like they weren't joking about any of it. They were promoting it, and they were getting applause from their audience rather than laughter. And somebody coined the term clapter to describe that. Clapter, where you're going for the applause of affirmation instead of the laughter of amusement. And so I think comedians have been doing that for a while. And it's bad. It's bad for comedy because, people aren't getting the jokes that they really want to hear. The things that should be made fun of are not being made fun of. And it's ultimately it's bad for speech because people are afraid that whatever they're going to say is going to get them canceled. So yeah, political correctness has been a big problem there. But again, it creates opportunities. I think the Babylon Bee is successful because of that. I think there's going to be a lot of other areas of media and entertainment where conservatives start to take back some ground because there are no fly zones that the left won't even go into, and they're leaving that wide open for someone else to come into that territory and take over. So what was the second part of the question? Something about jokes. We over the line jokes.
Yeah, are there things that you won't touch at the Babylon Bee? Like, for instance, like the Holocaust or Hitler or stuff like that. Like, is there something that's totally off limits that you won't write a satire piece about?
Not necessarily. It depends on the joke and what we're trying to do with it. Because not all satire. I use the word joke, but not all satire is really a joke. Sometimes it's making a very serious point. Sometimes it's just stupid and trying to make you laugh, and then other times it's like, over the top silly. But other times it can be very serious, where the point that we're making, we're mocking something in the midst of some tragic circumstance to really draw out some double standard or hypocrisy or some awful idea that shouldn't be taken seriously. So I think sometimes satire can be misinterpreted around those tough topics where it's like, oh, well, we shouldn't be making light of this. And it's like, wait a minute, we weren't, by doing satire on it, we weren't making light of it. It's because we take it so seriously that we're trying to make a point on this one. So it's not always just for laughs. But as far as like particular topics, no, I wouldn't say there's any topic that we have that's just off limits. It would just be making sure that when we make the joke or write the satirical piece, we're doing it in a way where it's not, we're not just being deliberately insensitive to be insensitive. We actually do have a point to make, and it's a clear enough point that people aren't going to misunderstand it and think that we are being super insensitive. So there's a lot of thought that goes into that.
That makes sense. So AI is like becoming this incredible force on social media. Are you worried that AI is going to make it almost impossible, if not impossible, to extinguish between reality and satire? Like, for example, I think it was like 2 days ago, I saw this video with AOC. I don't know if you've seen it, where she's talking about Elon Musk sending rockets to the sun to study the sun, and she wants to do it during the daytime so it's still light out instead of nighttime.
I haven't seen that. No,
Like, I got 20 seconds into the video until I'm like, wait a minute,
it's a
this
deep fake.
can't be real. But it was such a good deep fake that it had me. And if she wasn't saying stuff that was so like obviously, nobody in the world would say that,
Right.
I would have bought into it. Like, is that a
Right.
worry of you that you have?
That AI is going to make things indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I think a lot of the blame, like one of the things that the Bee is criticized for is making jokes that are too believable. And it's like we're trying to mislead people on purpose. And I think all of the blame for that, I don't blame the gullible people who think the satire is real. I blame the people who are so crazy that when we do a satirical joke, like a joke about how AOC goes on The Price is Right and guesses that everything is free or something like that, the reason people believe it and think it's real is because she's almost like a parody or caricature of a real person. She says outrageous things. Trump says outrageous things. Like these characters that are out there are larger than life, wild, hard to satirize characters. Biden's out there saying, "I've got 2 words for you: made in America." Like that seems like a joke, but it's not. He really said that. So I don't know. I mean, reality gets a lot of the
Wait,
reality is
in's not a word though.
What's that?
In's not a word.
It's a word. It's a preposition. So I don't know. I mean, with AI, it adds an element to it where it's like, if you're doing parody for the purpose of parody, then, AI can even play a role in that. But if what you're doing is just for the purpose of making people believe something happened that didn't happen, the intent that's there for that, then that's obviously a lot more devious and could be potentially very problematic. I already see deep fakes that look like so convincing. It's really hard to distinguish. And like you said, it was so over the top, you kind of figured out that it was parody. But not all deep fakes go for that. A lot of them are just trying to make you think that they said something that they didn't say. So yeah, there's definitely a problem there.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the future election cycles once the AI and deepfakes get more involved. So this is a game we play with all of our all the people that come onto our show. I'm going to give you 2 different things, and you're going to have to pick one of the 2.
Okay.
All right, so you have to go to dinner with either Hillary Clinton or Dylan Mulvaney and talk with them for 2 hours. Who would it be?
Dylan Mulvaney for sure. I think there could actually be some really funny and interesting stuff that comes out of a conversation like that. With Hillary Clinton, man, I don't know that I could spend 2 hours with Hillary Clinton. I would just, no, there's no way. I'd have to go with Dylan on that one.
Dylan was your man of the year, right?
Dylan was our man of the year because yeah, Dylan was named woman of the year by somebody else.
And you weren't kicked off of X for it either.
Yeah, I would like to have dinner with Dylan Mulvaney and hand him our man of the year trophy in person. That would be pretty cool.
All right, so you have to pick between, for the Republican nominee for president for the election, Nikki Haley or Vivek Ramaswamy.
Ooh, interesting. I wish I knew more about Nikki. Maybe it's just that she doesn't get enough coverage. I don't know a lot about her positions, and Vivek gets so much attention. And I've actually met him personally. I'd probably have to go with Vivek on that one.
All right, how about Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis?
You can't trap me with that. I'm not answering that one. Not answering that one. Well, for one thing, we don't endorse candidates, and everybody wants to try to throw us in one camp or the other. We're constantly accused of being Trump shills, and then other people will accuse us of being in DeSantis.
Okay, so it's not for the nomination. It's just let's just say it's just to hang out for a day.
I would say, okay, so I had dinner with Trump back in February, so it's DeSantis's turn.
Okay, there you go. That was easy. All right, finally, Ed Krassenstein or Brian Krassenstein?
Let's see. Who's got more followers?
I do. That's me.
Then I pick the underdog.
Thanks. Yes.
I'll give him a boost.
I think I won the last three.
No, you both have more than I
I know.
do.
Why does Brian win this every time? Like, can somebody just pick me for once?
Does he? Does he win it every time?
I think so. I think it's been every single time.
I like you both.
No, thanks for joining. It's actually been a really great conversation. And if our followers think that we agreed with Seth on a lot, just note that this is actually satire.
Yeah, you guys might get canceled for having too much in common with me. Be careful with that.
Yeah, thanks again, Seth.
Thanks
It was a
again.
pleasure.
All right. Thanks, guys.